I stand with democracy in its purest form. A system and framework where citizens can speak their minds and express themselves in order to form a more perfect union. I stand for equality and the notion that no person should be left behind in the pursuit for knowledge, civil discourse, and representation. And because social media is such an effective tool to foster these values and notions, I affirm today that, resolved, in the United States, social media is beneficial for democratic values. I find democratic values as enshrined within our First Amendment, the rights to assemble freely, express ourselves, and inherently find equality for us all. My argument for the defense of social media as a foster for American democracy is simple. First, because social media allows the opinions, stories, and news of Americans to proliferate equally and efficiently to the masses within the marketplace of ideas. And second, because social media enables assembly for civic engagement and activism to impact political change, social media should be viewed as a beneficial tool for democratic values. In order to move on, we must first understand one simple notion: that the idea of a public discourse revolves around the idea and notion of a marketplace for ideas. Long postulated by political thinkers and freethinkers alike, it's a concept postulating that forms of discussion used by the populace at large should exchange information and opinions efficiently and effectively. To this end, Peter Majore affirms in a University of Michigan Law School review back in 2012 that, quote, social media has become the ideal manifestation of this marketplace of ideas, end quote. To this end, social media, as the Pew Research Center found in a survey conducted just this year in January, confirms Majore's conclusions. The center itself finding that roughly half of Americans find themselves receiving news regarding politics and society often or sometimes. And because of the simplicity in the design of communication on social media platforms, the same survey found that overall, 71% of Americans receive their news from social media. That's more than 2 in 3 Americans. When put together, these statistics are massive. It tells us of the bigger picture that social media in America is a bastion in transmitting ideas and opinions. Furthermore, because of its simplicity, oftentimes involving just one click to share ideas, social media acts as a forum unrivaled for discussion where most of America can easily exchange ideas on the marketplace for such notions. Furthermore, because social media outlets like Facebook and Twitter can be accessed with user accounts equal in their ability to grow and proportional in their ability to signal boost ideas relevant to the users themselves, a Pew Research Center survey in July of 2018 into African Americans and Hispanics who partake in social media found that oftentimes underrepresented minorities in the highest level of government equally have the voice to voice breaking news, opinions, and stories to their communities, just like their white counterparts. The truth is, town halls are a thing of the past. In the current age of information, the only acceptable forum for democracy with the efficiency and equality to match demanded of our current society that is so hyper-connected are social media platforms. Secondly, to address my argument of social media platforms being integral to increased civic engagement and political activism, it appears that social media platforms allowed for easier opportunities to create greater assembly in political movements. In an interview with the New York Times in June of 2020, Princeton professor Omar Waswa is quoted to have said, social media was helping publicize police brutality and galvanizing public support for protesters' goals, a role that his research found conventional media played a half-century ago, end quote. He furthermore stated that, quote, the internet was making it easier to organize social movements today, for good and for ill. The truth is, democracy is always as good as we make it. At the heart of democratic values, this ability to assemble freely and to protest and to speak without hindrances by communication or otherwise is democracy. While the protests themselves back in June of 2020, or any other protest for that matter, may not have been ideal ones or objectively correct, the ability to allow citizens who care about societal change to protest and speak is very much democratic. Because of the good within social media platforms, and because social media and the project of the internet can foster civic engagement in connectivity and equal opportunities to share opinions, you must affirm. Because the entire project of social media promotes polarizing, irreconcilable divisions within American society, and because the very structure of social media promotes real threats to democracy, I negate the resolution. I believe democracy requires healthy communication, and as Harvard professor Cass Sunstein defined it, it requires 3 goals to be met. News and opinions should be found by citizens without preference or choice in their presentation. Secondly, many or most citizens should have a wide range of common experiences in real life to share. And finally, citizens should be positioned to see the difference between truths and falsehoods. But, as an increasing number of academic studies has pointed out, the problems associated with social media directly contradict these goals of democracy as outlined by Sunstein. With its algorithms, filters, and community structures, social media has, as researchers Bolain, Olaniran, and Indy Williams found, the ability to, quote, alter civic engagement, thus essentially hijacking democracy by influencing individuals towards a particular way of thinking. In order to do this, social media has 2 distinct weapons to sow division and fake news to the American populace. The first being the isolating nature of tribalistic online echo chambers, and the second being the promotion of content that would otherwise provoke outrage. To begin, an article written by Paige Cabianca and published by the University of Texas at Austin defined online echo chambers as places where, quote, one experiences a biased and tailored media experience that eliminates opposing viewpoints and differing voices, end quote. And while these Narcissus-esque echo chambers may seem very dystopian and very unlike our current reality, Orwellian even, press releases by social media juggernaut Facebook back in 2016 promised online experiences just that, quote, show people stories that are most relevant to them. And later on in the same briefing stating that, concerningly, quote, we are in the business of connecting people and ideas, and matching people with the stories they find most meaningful, end quote. In rebuttal, Harvard professor Cass Sunstein quickly pointed out the worrying problem with this level of personalization in news and political opinions, saying that, quote, citizens should be exposed to materials that they would not have chosen in advance. Worryingly, by allowing the decision to view what like-minded users want to hear, they essentially burrow themselves and their echo chamber groups into confirmation bias, where personal beliefs quickly become unequivocal truths shared by a large group of people. In order to achieve this goal, a more concerning article by the New York Times in 2018 by researchers Max Fisher and Amanda Taub found content of outrage and tribalism to directly dictate the emergence of these online echo chambers. Quote, studies find that negative primal emotions, fear and anger, draw the most engagement. So posts that provoke these emotions rise naturally, end quote. Simply, outrage porn helps people share their voices. And because of that, we are in a perpetual loop where people are forced to listen to the most outrageous claims possible, ones that stir the deepest emotions and allow for partisanship and polarization to occur. It's more concerning when we consider it in a larger picture. The implications of the findings are more concerning than ever. As University of Utah Associate Professor C.Thi Nguyen wrote in an article by The Conversation in September 2019, quote, echo chambers isolate their members, not by cutting off their lines of communication to the world, but by changing whom they trust. Quite literally, social media algorithms and filter feeds reimagine who should have credibility and clout in our society. These sentiments directly erode public confidence and trust in our societal institutions, and allow ourselves to be more tribal and mistrustful in nature. If one wishes for an example, look no further than the current outbreak of QAnon and right-wing conspiracy theories. Because of a skewed online reality, NPR reported directly after the 2020 presidential election that only a quarter of Republicans accepted Trump's defeat at the ballot box. More horrifyingly, social media echo chamber groups found on Parler and Facebook and social media poisonously promoted the 1/6 Capitol insurrection. Echo chambers are poisonous and often encourage members to be more partisan, tribal, and unequivocally unable to negotiate with opposing viewpoints. In short, it creates a culture of disassociation and political absolutism, 2 products of democratic ideals Professor Sunstein outlined that directly crumble in the face of. We simply cannot allow it to work. Political absolutism breeds mistrust and breeds a democracy where everyone mistrusts the others. Thus, because of simple disassociation and political polarization, we must negate social media's effects on our society. Thank you.